We're still another couple minutes. It's 13 past, and I think we're going to start German style, yeah. Oh, exactly. Tea service? Welcome, everyone. I'll give people just a couple more minutes to sit down, but I see that our clock is already running, so we're going to start in about 30 seconds. Welcome. I'm Kim Dozier. I'm a CNN Global Affairs analyst, and I am honored to be here with this illustrious panel, who I will introduce as I give you a moment for remarks each. We're looking at 75 years of NATO. What is there to celebrate this summer? So to set the scene, Kyiv is still in Ukrainian hands. Kharkiv is under threat, possibly because NATO allies have not kept Ukraine as fully supplied as it's needed to be. That is according to a shamefaced NATO Secretary General who says openly that NATO allies have let Ukraine down. Meanwhile, Putin has secured his hold on power. He's silenced critics with years of nearly unchallenged crackdowns. He's ended the voices of heroes like Alexei Navalny. He's secured his supply lines for weaponry, oil, etc. via Iran, every manner of machine tool from China, artillery, and goodness knows what else from North Korea, such that Moscow is now waging its own harsh spring offensive that could cost Kyiv territory and will surely cost Kyiv what is much harder to replace, lives. Yet I understand that the theme of the NATO meeting this summer is going to be a celebration of NATO. Now I understand that it's good that you've got 2 more members, in large part due to Russia's actions. But even as I try to stay an impartial journalist, I'm having trouble seeing what there is to celebrate. Perhaps this panel can help. So I'm going to start with hometown advantage here. Minister Pevkur, how do you see it?
Well, I believe the hometown advantage is for Celeste because Washington is hosting the summit.
Well, this is true. Okay.
Yes,
For the Lennart Meri,
we are just hosting the conference, the modest conference here. So it's anyway, it's good to be here. And when we think about NATO and 75 years, well, of course, it has been a success story that for 75 years we have not had a war in Euro-Atlantic zone. But in a way, it's just one day among many others, and then 1 year among many others. And definitely, there are too many challenges in the world at the moment. luckily, we do not see these challenges in NATO when we talk about the conflicts. So when we have the Ukraine war still ongoing more than 800 days already. We have evolving conflict, Armenia, Azerbaijan, so Georgia is evolving. So we have Gaza, many other conflicts all around the world. So it's not the best time for the globe at the moment. And then we have some magnetic storms from the sun. But anyway, so yes, it is 75 years. Yes, it is a celebration year when you take the number. But in fact, we have many things to do. So yes, we will have a new SecGen. We will look very closely what we have achieved in NATO. And to be honest, there are things we can be happy of, and then there are things we have to be, very seriously, or we have to say very seriously that we have not been successful. I'll just maybe give you, for a start, one number. This number is that when we take NATO countries last 25 years, then the increase of defense spending in NATO countries has been a bit over 60%, 61%. And this is not taking into account the inflation. When they take the Russian increase of defense spending, then this has been 592%. But the good news is that Estonian defense spending at the same time have increased 656%. So, of course, the starting point was a bit different. But by fact, we can say that percentage-wise, Estonia has increased more defense spending as Russia, and 10 times more than NATO countries averaged. So, still, there is a lot to do. Officially, as I say, 75 is just a nice number, but it will be a very difficult and hard week. And we have many things to achieve. So one of these is also Estonian initiative, very nice one called ACDC. So remember everyone. So it's and it will be a hard metal initiative. So it's Allied Capability Development Commitment initiative. So I truly hope that all the allies will join that initiative because there are capability gaps, and we have to be very serious in a way that we all have to invest more. 20 countries having 2% is not enough. We would like to urge to go to 2.5. Estonia is investing 3. So we have 4 countries at the moment in NATO who have 3% or more. So Estonia, Greece, US, and Poland. So I would like to see that we have more because Russia has 7% at the moment.
Secretary Wallander, make us feel good about this summit. At the same time, it sounds like many of these summits are decided, like the results are decided beforehand. It sounds like from what the minister is saying, this is going to be actual live deal making behind the scenes.
Well, thanks so much, Kim. The bottom line for celebrating the summit is for 75 years, NATO has succeeded in defending and therefore deterring against first Soviet and now Russian aggression against the Allies that came together based not only on their assessment of threat, but on the basis of their values and their democratic governments, and therefore the commitment of their citizens. Throughout history, there have been military alliances that were decided without the consent and support of citizens, and they were fragile, and they disappeared over time. But NATO, because it was founded in the values and principles of the transatlantic community, and then the democratic governments and governance of the Allies, actually has continued, despite the predictions of some scholars some 35 years ago that it would break apart. And NATO adapted to new security environments after the Cold War, and NATO built in the resilience and the strong relationships and embedded in those values. That meant when Russia first invaded Ukraine in 2014, we were ready to renew the commitment to the transatlantic alliance. And then when Russia began its second assault, its second invasion of Ukraine, the threat to European security and European values was clear. And at this point, for example, the United States now has over 90,000 US military forces in NATO. In NATO, we have 8 battle groups across the eastern flank, led by different countries. The United States leads only one of those, although we contribute in one way or another to all of them. So the clear message of capable defense, and I can speak more about that in terms of what we hope to achieve at the summit and intend to, defense, therefore deterrence, and therefore our enduring commitment and belief in our values and our democracies is what we really do need to celebrate. And it was those foundations that enabled us to pivot 2 years ago at the Madrid Summit to begin to work on making NATO ready for a new era, unfortunately, of Russian threat and global threats to the NATO alliance, to transatlantic security, and to begin to build the military capabilities and the political commitments that are appropriate to the challenges we face. Yes, we're still talking about some of those specific elements, which include defense industrial investments that we intend to do together. But even the fact that we're still working on that, still refining that, still appreciating fantastic ideas from NATO allies for how to make that real is an indication, because there is a recognition in NATO as well that we're not only needing to meet the challenge in May of 2024 to European security, but Russia is a chronic threat, a chronic problem, and we need to get together as an alliance to invest in our defense industrial production capacity so that we can continue to resource our militaries, send that clear message of defense capability, and therefore successfully deter a Russian attack on NATO allies.
Thank you. Dr. Wadephul, you are facing, well, a tough summer in that you're facing rising public angst over how Germany has stepped up with funding the Ukrainian fight. What are you looking forward to and/or dreading this summer?
No, I have the same opinion like the two speakers said before. That is, we have really a big reason to celebrate that we still are together. This is the most important, the most successful alliance of the world. And if you come to other regions of the world, to the Gulf states, to Asia, everybody asks you, how did you do that? And it is easy to marry, but to stay together for 75 years is the complicated thing. But we were successful. And now in these days, we are bigger and more powerful than we were ever before, because with Sweden and Finland, we have two new powerful countries joining us. Sweden, after 200 years, where they absolutely clearly said, we are neutral, we do not join any alliance, but that changed. They are in. And this is one point when I was in Beijing at the end of the last year, what brought some of my partners there to rethink whether it is so clever to only support Russia on its way in being aggressive still in Ukraine. The second point is what brought some doubts, as far as I saw in their brains, was the bond between the United States of America and Europe is stronger and deeper than it was before. And the third thing is, we are again aware where the purpose of this alliance is for. We have a new sense of purpose for this alliance, and this will last on, as Celeste just said. Russia, however this war will end, will still be there and will ever be a threat for the free Europe. So we have a lot to celebrate, but of course, coming from the country of Zeitenwende, I have also to admit that if you ask the average German on the street, does she or he really recognize what is at stake, what do we have to do, that we have to spend one and the other euro not for social affairs or for infrastructure, but for defense, there's still a lot to do. Second thing is, do all countries, especially in Europe, really understand what they could do and what they should do for Ukraine? I would say no. We have an ongoing discussion what is really needed urgently in Ukraine. Air defense, for instance. A lot of countries do have these systems. None of these countries is deploying it to Ukraine. What has still to happen that they do so? Is my question. And of course, we have sometimes very strong and clear words, for instance, from Paris. But is the spending in money coming in the amount which is necessary? I would say no. There could be done more. Germany as well. So if you look to the future, I would really also say, if we want to celebrate the 100th anniversary of NATO, and I would say this has to be our goal, we have to do a lot more on the right path. We have been following the last years, and I think the people are ready to do so. Germany has absolutely changed its defense policy in the last 3-4 years. It was absolutely impossible in Germany to imagine that we could deliver weapons into an ongoing war. In Germany, for decades, it was absolutely clear for all governments and for all parties not to deliver weapons in crisis zones. But now we are absolutely clear. We are supporting Ukraine. We are not neutral in that combat. We are on one side, and we're doing that, and that is nobody putting in doubt. So there has a lot of things in the mind have changed, but we still have to convince people. And as far as I see, there's a lot in Germany to do, and the Chancellor is not always the person who's going forward, who's clear, who's saying what is necessary, but it's the angst, the anger you just mentioned before, the German angst, is sometimes a thing he's also selling for, and that also causes some problems. So it's still a lot to do.
Especially with the rising fortunes of right-wing parties that want nothing to do with Ukraine aid.
Right. They are. We have two new parties which clearly say, stop that war, stop each and every support for Ukraine, do whatever, an agreement with Putin, and they have a lot of support, unfortunately, especially in the eastern part of Germany, which, in my view, suffered under the Soviet regime for decades. But it's hard to understand that. But they see it like these right or left-wing parties, and so we are. That's a tough job to do, especially in these times when we are campaigning for the Euro elections on the 9th of June.
Ambassador Vimont, you have dealt with Middle East peace talks in your time in service to France. You've headed the European External Action Service, but perhaps most importantly for this panel, right now, you're not in government. So you can be hopefully totally brutally honest about everything that's just been said before you. And any remarks you might want to make about how your German neighbor here has just called Paris out. Please.
I am relieved. I thought you were going to ask a Frenchman to celebrate NATO. But I will, because it's definitely a great success. But you know, the awkward and somewhat complex relationship between France and NATO has been there for years. But things are moving in the right direction. Seen from the outside, what I think is maybe the most important for this summit in Washington is to avoid fighting again the battles of last year, for instance. I think we should avoid that at all costs because it sends exactly the wrong message to Moscow. And I think we should avoid that at all costs. And I think everybody has more or less understood that. The preparation for that summit, I hope, and I think it will, go in the right direction, which means a message of unity and a message of action, I think, which is really what is the most important. Speaking from the European point of view, I still think we have to uplift and upgrade our act. Europeans hope that we will win that war without at the same time thinking that they are not themselves at war. And this is really one of the difficulty we're facing today. We're spending time and again, we're spending all our time in trying to impose upon ourselves some red lines, which is exactly the contrary of what we should be doing now. We are facing a situation on the ground which is, I think, a turning point in this whole conflict, and we need to be aware of that and to move into that direction. So Washington should be about concrete actions being made public, short-term actions in support of Ukraine, long-term action also. And I think we have all the toolbox for that. But now it's not only doing it and saying we're doing it, it's doing it quickly, because we have time and again been too late and too little, I think. And I think this is really what it's all about, and this is what everybody's watching. But could I add a second point? And here it's the diplomat that is talking. The problem with NATO, its members, it's that we're very much self-centered, Euro-centered, I would say, to a very large extent. What is happening this day, and what has happened this morning with this, I think, very important Russian-Chinese statement on the intention of both countries to now reshape the world order. We knew that was the intention, but now it's public, and it's 8,000 words statement, very much detailed and very clearly oriented to a new world order that can be ruled by these two countries and their allies. And I think for NATO to keep on repeating the same kind of narrative, we will be perceived by many of our partners outside of Europe as trying to defend the old world order. And I think we have to change that, and we have to find a new narrative, much more open. It was discussed this morning, and I think it was quite right. And that means that, as we're going to talk a lot about Ukraine in Washington, we need to reposition our narrative about Ukraine and make it understood by many of our partners outside of Europe that this war is also a war that will have implications for every one of them. You know, the violation of international order, of the sovereign borders of independent countries, the risk of what could happen in the Black Sea about maritime transports and the way they could be under pressure from Russia. Exactly the same in the Indo-Pacific, you know, for countries like Vietnam, Philippines, and others. The Ukraine crisis at the moment have concrete implication for each one of them. And in my opinion, this is really one of the messages we should send out of Washington in due course. We should broaden the picture, give the broad picture of what all this is about. If we stick to Europe alone, we will not be understood, and many of what should be our natural partners in this conflict will look elsewhere.
So the global public needs to be made aware that from your perspective, from the perspective of everyone meeting at this summit, this is an existential choice for all the countries involved. Minister, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, because I fully agree with the ambassador that you know, we should start to think, or we are thinking actually, about the narratives in a way that how the world is changing, how the globe is changing, and unfortunately, what we see that, you know, that Russia-China axis is getting more traction in some countries, and globally, let's be honest. In NATO, we have 32 countries. That means that close to, let's say, 170 countries in United Nations are not in NATO. And of course, Russia is trying to influence many of these others to be on their positions, to be on the side of other values. And I fully agree that we should reach the simple personnel in every country, or simple people in every country, to get the point to them that this war in Ukraine affects everyone in every apartment they live. Because you don't want to end up in the situation that your neighbor just comes to your apartment and says that that's mine now. Because this is what Russia is doing at the moment. It's just going by force to others' territory and saying that, and claiming that this is mine now.
But I can remember hearing Estonian officials over the years trying to tell me about Russia's ambitions. And until the February invasion, I didn't believe it. I thought you all were paranoid.
Putin said that in 2007 in Munich. So why? Of course, we were maybe amplifying that a bit. But at the end of the day, Putin set the scene already 17 years ago, what he wants to achieve. And in a way, China acts the same. So they are buying companies piece by piece, one company by the other. And this is their way to get more influence in the world. And this is why, that when you put that to the longer perspective, then you understand why they are acting like this. One is using more military power because they don't know how to act otherwise. And the other one is much more clever and trying to take over the countries by owning the economies. So this is why, when we are not, or when we are exactly looking only into the mirror and claiming to ourselves that we are good, then this might be a good choice for all of us, but not to the others outside of the room. So, of course, we know that we are the strongest military alliance in the world, and we can keep the peace. But in one moment, when this will be put on test, are we ready? Then I would say that in Washington, one thing we do, that we will look into the regional plans and how executable they are. And of course we say, and we know that they are executable, but with risks at the moment. So we do not have enough enablers, we do not have enough capabilities at the moment, so we need to put more money into defense in order to get the result we want to, or what we agreed in Vilnius. So the regional plans were approved in Vilnius, and we know that we are not there to say that the regional plans are fully executable.
Well, for instance, the Estonian NATO brigade, that's not a permanent assignment here, is it? You would like it to be, yes?
Well,
Sorry, not the division, not the brigade. The
well,
division.
no. Well, then now we dig into the Estonian defense formation. But anyway, so we have a division, Estonian division, which has 3 brigades, 2 Estonian brigades, and 1 British allocated brigade. And we have NATO allies here with the EFB battalion. We have 1 US battalion close to 2nd Brigade, or linked to the 2nd Brigade. But nevertheless, this is not the point. At the end of the day, even when we have a British brigade here, and Germans have the brigade in Lithuania, this is not enough when it comes to the war. So we are all in this together. And then when we do not have the logistics in place, when we do not control the Baltic Sea, when we talk about A2AD, when we do not control the supply lines, when we do not have enough in our stocks, and then we don't have enough stockpiles of ammunition, then we will be in trouble. We do not have time. And to put that into perspective, Russia maybe is not looking into that to go to Berlin. They are looking to that to take a small piece of Estonia or a small piece of Latvia and to test NATO. And that's enough to humiliate the West and to achieve the strategic goal that NATO is not working. So this is what we have to be ready for, and this is why we are saying that we do not have time. Maybe 2-3 years is that where we have to be ready fully to implement and to execute these regional plans.
Is Russia closer or further from taking a bite out of the Baltics?
Well, at the moment, they are Russia is in Ukraine, so they do not have enough firepower in our neighborhood for a full-scale war. but that doesn't mean that they're not trying to affect us otherwise. We probably do not have much time to talk about the hybrid threats and all that, but they are testing. They are going piece by piece further. Look, they attacked Volkhov. They have conducted different hybrid attacks also here in Estonia against the car of Minister of Interior, etc. So they go more like brutal, and they will take the next tool from their toolbox and use it. So it's nothing new for us. We know how they operate, and we truly believe that all the allies have the same understanding, and this is why we are, like parrots going around the world and then saying our message.
A group of reporters just got to sit down with Prime Minister Kallas this afternoon, and one of her frustrations is, she says some European partners and allies don't seem to understand this hybrid warfare. They're looking at the dots, they're not seeing the dots the pattern makes across Europe. So how are you getting that message across?
Well, the message is very simple, that when we take the European elections approaching very rapidly, then just ask from the member states what is the main topic on these European elections. When you go to the streets in Estonia, you will get an answer that it's security and defense. When you go to some other countries, then you will see that it's agriculture, it's farmers, it's maybe infrastructure, social benefits, and all that. But
that's not Russia's fault, is it?
Well, yes, but yes. The truth is that most of European countries have been far away from atrocities, and they've not felt the deportation of your people. They have not felt rapes. They have not felt and seen the killing of civilian people. We've seen that also during the Soviet occupation, and we have this connection still to the Second World War, which many countries do not have. And these generations who have now the right to say something, to elect someone, they do not feel the urgency because it's something far away. It's in Ukraine. Although the battlefield from here is more or less the same distance as it is from Berlin or from the German border.
Whereas you're watching the pattern and you're getting flashbacks.
Well, unfortunately, these flashbacks are very recent ones.
Secretary Wallander, let's talk about deliverables. Are we going to see a NATOization of the Ramstein process, for instance? What would be the best case scenario for you coming out of the summit?
So there's sort of two buckets to think of. One is this defense and deterrence of the alliance, and that includes the defense industrial investments and coordination that I've already referred to. It also includes getting to 32 members of NATO, allies of NATO, committing at least 2% of GDP. We've made extraordinary progress, and we should celebrate that progress, but we should not just rest on what's been achieved in the last few years. We need to get to 32 members. There was an agreement at the Vilnius Summit that 2% would be the floor, not the ceiling, and an explicit recognition that in order to be able to resource those regional plans adequately, all NATO allies are going to have to spend more than 2% of their GDP on defense, to include procurement and contracts with defense industry. And there's still work to be done, and the work is ongoing in these last few weeks to get the NATO allies to commit the necessary military units to allocate or assign the correct needed military units to fully resource the regional plans. Again, we've come a very long way, but we still have some more work to do, as the minister pointed out. I will note that from an American point of view, some of the assets that we are contributing to NATO are not themselves located in Europe. Part of our responsibility is to allocate resources for reinforcement and for logistics, to allocate in domains such as cyber sphere. So it's not only the apparent American soldiers who serve in Europe who will be among the elements of the American contribution to those regional plans. We also have national assets that will be coming to support the executability of the regional plans. The second major bucket of deliverables, of aspirations that I believe we will be able to agree to at 32 is a concrete plan for living up to the commitment that NATO has made for years and reaffirmed at both Madrid and Vilnius, that Ukraine will be a member of NATO. Secretary Blinken just recently in Kiev phrased this as a strong bridge to membership. Members have already agreed that Ukraine has moved beyond the standard processes of a membership action plan to meet the standards of interoperability, defense institution building, basically becoming NATO before joining NATO. That's what all new NATO members over the past 30 years have walked that path, including Estonia. And Ukraine is well down that path. And we are looking at ways for NATO to work more, even more actively, even more constructively with the Ukrainian Armed Forces, with the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, but also, as I noted, militaries don't join NATO, democracies join NATO, so working whole of government with the Ukrainian government to help them meet the NATO standards for processes. It's a dizzying array of processes that we all live with as NATO allies, but they're important because they create that commonality in defense planning and understanding what the regional plans require in bringing our militaries to the point where they have the kind of experience and partnership where they can serve, where the UK, the US can serve together in Estonia seamlessly in order to contribute to our collective defense. That is really important for Ukraine because they have the political commitment that they will be a member of NATO, but they need to see that material and practical support, and that's what we in DoD have been focused on. We are looking at elements of the existing security assistance infrastructure that resides under various elements, not under NATO right now, under different arrangements that we created during the crisis to be able to supply security assistance to Ukraine. We're still discussing what is best to be able to put under a NATO hat, but I would say that our priority is consistency in providing that security assistance because it's been a great foundation, and the security assistance processes themselves have baked in the requirement that everything we do with Ukraine, everything we have done with Ukraine in the last 2 years in training, in sustainment, and in providing actual hardware has been to the standards of NATO interoperability. So we've already helped Ukraine to walk that path. We just need to finish building that bridge, and that is a major goal for the Washington Summit.
I have to channel a little bit of the frustration that I've been hearing in the halls about Western support overall, but especially the Biden administration support. That we all saw what happened, what played out with Congress, that it took the GOP speaker a while to finally bring the measure to the floor, et cetera. But rather, instead, the problem is with the piecemeal, we won't give you this, okay, now we will. We won't give you ATACMS, okay, now we will give you ATACMS. We won't give you this armored vehicle, okay, now we will. It's just a little bit at a time it's like Ukraine is a drowning man and he's getting pulled out just enough to get a gulp of air before falling under again. That's how it's been described to me, just enough. As opposed to, as Zelensky was asking for in the very beginning, give us everything we need right now before we lose that human capital that we need to drive this weaponry that's coming in. Of course, Ukraine's also gotten this hodgepodge of different weapons from different places, but that's another matter. So to those critics who say, why do you keep giving them these piecemeal bits of aid and then tying their hands by saying, but you can't use it to hit Russia, or you can only use it in this manner?
So the United States, over the last 2 years, has provided over $48 billion in assistance to Ukraine, and now is in the process of delivering and contracting the other $60 billion that Congress just passed, and Congress just passed it. So that is not piecemeal. That is a substantial commitment of assistance, and it is a testament to the strength of American bipartisan support for Ukraine in its fight. Since the beginning of this conflict, our security assistance has been driven by Ukrainian identified requirements and priorities. The fighting has changed over the past 2 years. And just look back. There's a sort of what's happening this week. It's not, what's happening this week was not what was happening in the summer of 2022. So we have been responsive. I don't want to sound defensive, but I'm just philosophical that it's easy to stand on the outside in May of 2024 and say, well, you've just done piecemeal. We've delivered some historic amounts, and with our colleagues, our allies and partners in the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, who have themselves delivered nearly $50 billion in assistance. We have helped Ukraine to fight Russia, to hold them, to first eject them from 50% of the territory that Russia took, to reestablish their commerce in the Black Sea by driving back the Russian Black Sea fleet from Ukrainian shores back behind Crimea. That has been an unprecedented historic production of security assistance to Ukraine.
I hear you, and yet maybe folks won't come out and say it politely to you, but hey, I'm the press, so they'll say it to me. And the complaint has been piecemeal in that it's like begrudging, all right, now we'll give you this. Okay, now we'll give you a bit more of this. Whereas I was hearing from the first year in Kyiv, in DC, from all sorts of Western officials that, man, they need, if our goal is to help them win, and if we define winning the way they do as pushing Russia all the way out of Crimea, then this is just enough. And it's, yes, I know there are manufacturing problems, and I know that there's been a complaint that the White House has been scared to tempt Putin into using a tactical nuke. And therefore, that has held it back at several different points. Oh, if we give them this, they might do this, and then there'll be a nuke launch from Moscow.
We have provided Ukraine with the capabilities they needed at the time, and that evolved from javelins and Stingers to when they started asking for HIMARS and longer range artillery, to that artillery. When they asked at first, partners and allies were getting capabilities as fast as possible to the Ukrainians, and that meant sending Soviet legacy capabilities, because that's the capabilities that the Ukrainians knew how to operate at the time. It took time to train them how to use American standard HIMARS. It took time to train them how to use Western tanks. This is magical thinking. This is magical thinking that in 2022, if you'd sent hundreds of Leopard tanks to the Ukrainians, they could have operated them successfully. I am absolutely confident that we have provided Ukraine effectively with what it needed at the time and what its military told us they needed at the time, and we provided it with the funding that we had available. So interesting you're hearing that from people. I remain confident that we have done what we needed to do at the time we needed to do it, and we continue to do that throughout because of our commitment to Ukraine succeeding and for Russia's efforts to subjugate Ukraine to be a strategic failure.
And while I'm picking on you, before I go to your colleagues, you have been in lots of different rooms making decisions, Iraq, Afghanistan, et cetera. From your perspective, has this process moved faster than some of the processes you've seen? Because I remember hearing similar complaints on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan from U.S. troops complaining about the Pentagon, complaining about Washington. So is it the process of acquisition, et cetera, as much as the political decisions?
So since the summer of 2022, until we couldn't do this because we didn't have a supplemental passed by the Congress as of the fall of 2023. We have provided Ukraine every 2 weeks with a package of requirements that evolved. That was 155 ammunition when they needed it. It is Gimmelers for their HIMARS when they need it. It was M1 Abrams tanks when they needed it. It continues right now to be several of those elements, including now longer range fires. So, and again, there's so much that can be delivered on trucks, and those trucks, I've visited the supply locations. Those trucks are full every time they go across the border, and they go across the border at a regular pace. So again, are there mistakes that have been made? Quite, of course. There are always things you learn from, but we did learn over time, and we have delivered the capabilities at a historic pace.
Chairman Wadephul, I think you were making reference to the fact that France has promised a lot but delivered not very much.
I would like to take the occasion to thank the United States for the leadership they really showed, and the Biden administration especially. Without this, Ukraine wouldn't have survived. That's the simple truth. But on the other hand, I would like to say to all of us, in Germany as well, France perhaps also, if the war goes on like it does now, Ukraine will lose. That is sure. It's a war of attrition. There's a need for soldiers already. And we see the small but steadily success of the Russian army. And if it goes on like this, I would refer a little bit more to the First World War as to the Second World War. That was then for the German army in 1918 the main problem. In a similar situation the Ukrainian forces are now facing. They will not withstand the Russian power with support from Iran, from China, from North Korea, well organized. With India, we've talked about the global south, India saying, okay, we are not on one side. We look where the interest of India is. If it goes on like this, Ukraine will lose. So my hope, my expectation for the summit is that NATO takes over the lead, that NATO makes the decision that Ukraine has to win. Because if Ukraine loses, we all lose. NATO loses, the whole West will. There will be a defeat for all of us. We'll lose a big country with all the people living there, with butcher being everywhere in Ukraine, with raw materials, with rare earth and all these things which are necessary for Russia and for China, and they are focused on these things, with losing the biggest wheat producer in Europe, that has a lot of impacts for Africa and so on. That would be absolutely a catastrophe for this world if Ukraine loses this war. And in my view, we all do not have really recognized what that practically means for us. We are very good in formulating, also I'm a member of the Parliamentary Assembly of NATO, in giving Ukraine a perspective when and how to join NATO. But if there is no Ukraine as a body, nobody can join us. So we have to practically really take concrete steps and not draw red lines for us day by day. And the invader, the aggressor, is allowed to do everything on Ukrainian soil. But Ukraine has restrictions, which is a country which is defending itself. And we all say, okay, don't use our weapons, our guns, and shoot across the border. Why that? They have the full international right behind them. Why not giving them the full support in order that they can defend their country, our international rule-based order, and all what is at stake at that very moment? And So that is my expectation and my hope. That is really necessary for NATO if it wants to become 100 years old, that we now take really the decision and have the absolute clear will in all capitals and all member states that we bring Ukraine.
That NATO sets the design of what victory would look like, rather than letting Ukraine do it. Minister, you've been very quiet, but I just wanted to let the audience know I would love to start asking questions because we're just over halfway through. So if, let's see, the lady there, and you, and Frank over there. So we'll get the 4 mics to them, but first, Minister.
Yeah, very quick comments, and I really have to disagree with you because NATO does not have assets. Member states, countries have. This is the point. And it's not the time anymore, you know, for nice words that, you know, we have to do more. It's way past, you know, it's 2 years since we've...
Are you disagreeing with Secretary Wallander or with the
no,
chairman?
With the, yeah, because, you know, that NATO cannot take the responsibility here. It's the member states, and what the member states in every capital can do is that we will say that is it, you know, our initiative 0.25% annually to Ukraine, or it doesn't matter what it is. We can also agree that, okay, we go to our stocks, we take 10% all now, tomorrow, and send to Ukraine. It doesn't matter. Is it manpads, is it ammunition for 155? Doesn't matter. When the collective decision is that every capital will take 10% of our military capabilities and send to Ukraine tomorrow, then we will not have this discussion that is it NATO's responsibility or someone else. The other comment I wanted to make that when NATO takes over, okay, let's discuss it. NATO made a decision. All the members of NATO made a decision in Wales that 2% is the goal.
Yeah.
How many did we have since that time till Vilnius? 11. 11 countries. Now, after Vilnius, before Washington, maybe we will have 20. But this was decision made together, and the countries did not fulfill it. So this is why I'm saying that it's about the capitals to make decisions, not NATO as a collective body.
I'm going to take 2 questions at a time. If you could introduce yourself and a plea to everyone, please make sure there's a question in your question.
Yes, thank you. My name is Irena Krasnoshtan. I'm from International Center for Ukrainian Victory. I would like to touch upon the point that was made about the allies providing Ukraine with what it asked for and what it needed for. In the first days of the full-scale invasion, Ukrainians have asked to close the sky over Ukraine. If that would have happened, we would not have been in the situation when the energy infrastructure in Ukraine is majorly destroyed and the million city inhabitants is facing the winter season without heat, and millions more refugees potentially will be in the European capitals. So my question is it not the time to consider it again to close the sky, to help Ukraine close the sky? Thank you.
Thank you. And Frank, if you could introduce yourself.
Thanks very much, Kim. Frank Gardner, BBC security correspondent. 10% of NATO members are good friends with Putin. Hungary has been extraordinarily obstructive in holding up military aid to Ukraine. Turkey blocked for a long time the accession of Finland and Sweden. And Slovakia, the new government, has famously said, we will not send one more bullet to Ukraine. Does the panel worry that this is a kind of fifth column, that these are cracks appearing in NATO solidarity?
So that, who would like to take Frank's question? Ambassador and Minister.
It's easy, and maybe it allows me also to say 1 or 2 comments about what has been said before. Yes. On the question of is there a lack of solidarity, I'm not so sure, because of course we can be somewhat unhappy with the performance of countries like Hungary, Turkey or Slovakia, But at the end of the day, when we come to a final decision, we have always been able to overcome those difficulties. So far, will it go on? We will see. But I'm quite impressed by the fact that by discussion, by going and trying to understand what really this is all about, these countries may, at the end of the day, decide to stay on the side, but they don't prevent the others from moving ahead. And this is what we have witnessed in the EU, for instance, with Hungary. Hungary is more and more engaged in a positioning which is very interesting, which is a kind of flexible Europe, which is, I don't agree, but I'll let you go ahead. By the way, we have this provision inside the treaty. We called it constructive abstention or something of that kind. This is what we're starting to witness also in NATO, and maybe it's true testimony to the growing complexity of diplomacy today. But we can go ahead if we want to. And this is the second point I wanted to make. This is all about politics at the end of the day, and we seem to forget sometimes politics in this whole thing. If some governments are having difficulty in reaching the 2% or reaching some of the commitments they have made, it's because they have to live with their population, which sometimes have completely different priorities. And this is about the need to do arbitration between different financial goals. And coming back to what the minister was saying earlier on, let's not be completely surprised that Spain and Portugal don't have exactly the same position as Estonia because of their history, because of their geography, and we have to accept that diversity. The great point about our democracies is that at the end of the day we manage to find solutions and to move ahead. And I think we should be proud of ourselves about being able to do that, because that, at the end of the day, is the strength of organizations like NATO or the European Union. And we must cherish that freedom inside each one of our countries and our right to say that we are not in agreement. The only point is, at the end of the day, what you need to have is all member states around the table being ready to be as constructive as possible and to help find a way forward. And so far, with difficulty, we have managed to do that.
Minister Pevkur, I'm wondering is Russian influence among these NATO members going to be the spoiler at the summer summit?
Well, first, I believe Russia will continue, to get more influence over the NATO countries. So for sure, they're trying to do that in different ways. And this is why I'm saying that when we talk about Article 5, then from the military's point of view, I don't see the risks. So the militaries are always ready to make what's necessary. I see the
but
challenge.
in defense of Ukraine, they're not a NATO member. What's necessary in defense of themselves?
When we talk about NATO challenges, what we, and do we have risks? The point is that, on the military level, when the decision is made, I do not see these risks. But on the political level, yes, the challenge is that at the end of the day, Article 5 needs 32 votes. So, and this is unfortunately, we see also some other formations, maybe even fortunately, that we have in this region, we have the Joint Expeditionary Forces, JEF format, we have Nordic-Baltic cooperation, so we do that regionally. So to secure that, if necessary, we can act immediately, and that, of course, our own readiness for defense. But what I wanted to say that definitely, when we talk about the Russian friends, then this is the choice of every country's people. And when it comes to Spain and Portugal, and we have some maybe different views on different things, this is also the strength of us. This is the democracy we have. And we have to live with that. And then also, I've been many times asked that, what if Trump wins the elections? So what? This is the choice of American people, and it's our choice to speak to the administration who is in power in Washington. So and then to explain why it is important to keep the unity and then to bring also the China-Russia axis to the game, etc. So in that sense, I do not or I'm not afraid of the elections. I'm afraid of Russian influence. And at the end of the day, you know, when you are already elected, then there is a brilliant saying, politics, that's the question to lead or to follow. We had this very briefly also yesterday during the first panel, but at the end of the day, the leaders of the country have to explain to their own population why we are making these decisions. When we are, or when we want to live in democracy and when we want to have these freedoms we have, then we have to invest to defense.
And Secretary Wallander, that question, Ukraine asked to close the sky in the very beginning. Our Ukrainian visitor asks, is it time to close the sky now?
So we have been providing Ukraine, we as a coalition, with air defense capabilities from the start. We have retrofitted Soviet-era aircraft that Ukrainian pilots from the beginning have been using to defend their own skies and kept the Russian Air Force out of the fight, which helped Ukraine to push back those Russian forces. Germany has contributed 3 Patriot batteries. The United States has contributed 1 and numerous other air defense capabilities. France has contributed air defense capabilities. Numerous countries have provided air-to-air and air various kinds of missile capabilities. So we did hear Ukraine in its air defense requirements. The challenge right now is that Russia has increased its production of cruise missiles and ballistic missiles. And I want to bring in an element of why that are back, because it has found partners who are interested in advanced UAVs, which are assaulting Ukrainian critical infrastructure. And that is China and that is Iran.
Yeah.
And so the calculations that were made in 2022 about what the kind of architecture of Ukrainian air defense required, which was sufficient, and also includes something we call the Franken-SAM system, which is to basically bring up to NATO standards that old Soviet legacy air defense and to provide NATO standard missiles for old Soviet launchers. It really has been effective, but we're facing a new challenge together, which is Russia is able to use cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and UAVs in a pattern and an assault capability that we've never seen before because they got this help from Iran and through various ways of evading sanctions and restrictions, China as well. So we are absolutely looking at ways to update the capabilities. The challenge is we're 2 years into this conflict, and because of the generosity of so many countries, they have, and I won't name names because it's not appropriate here to reveal such information. It's classified. Some countries have given away 100% of their capability in a particular area that arguably they need for the defense of their own country, and they have given it to Ukraine. You cannot wish for things to appear in your storage spaces. They have to be procured. You have to have investment. You have to have defense industrial production. We are now improving that. We are learning that. Many European countries have realized that they underinvested in defense. But we have to deal with the world the way it actually is. And the way the world is challenging because of Russia's ability to create this. I wouldn't call it an alliance. It's an alliance of convenience. It may be now transitioning to a deeper alliance as per the statement between Putin and Xi. But this is a new challenge to European security, and it's to go back to the NATO Summit, the topic of this panel, is that one of the issues that NATO allies have been grappling with is what is the role of Europe and European countries in addressing the challenge to Indo-Pacific security, because as my example just showed you, they're actually interlinked. Yes, NATO is about transatlantic security, but transatlantic security is affected by global security, and China's role in undermining the international order, the UN Charter, actually challenges Europe as well. That is not a full answer, but I assure you that understanding the requirements of Ukraine's air defense have been front and center, and we are working with the Ukrainian armed forces not just on the hardware, but also training them on how to more effectively use the air defense capabilities that they already had and that we have over 2 years provided to them.
Yeah, if I may, a very short comment about the skies, because I didn't say that. First, during the first months of the war, it was very difficult, of course, to send the air defense assets, because one thing I want to underline, we have to talk about capabilities, not assets, because it was a possibility during the first months also to send F-16, but there was nothing to do with the F-16 because there was no pilot available at that time, and also all the enablers and tankers, etc. So this is why, I have to applaud to every Ukrainian soldier, because they are at the moment the world champions of interoperability. They have all the variety of the weapon systems what we have in the world, and they still can operate with them. But normally to operate it successfully, because when you have tanks, infantry fighting vehicles, and APCs, then to have them effective on the battlefield, you need to work together. But just to send one tank to the battlefield, it doesn't help you. So this is why it's the same with the air defense. You have to be very careful here, because Russians are using also the tactics at the moment that they are sending tens of Shaheds, and after that comes only the cruise missile or ballistic missile. And at the end of the day, sorry to say, but in the war, you have to make choices. And there will be a number of casualties, and you cannot take down all the air assets what are shot towards you, unfortunately.
On that grim note, let's see, we have a question here, and then I'm just looking for other hands there, and one way back there afterwards. Please go ahead.
Michał Baranowski, GMF East. I wanted to do a little of a follow-up on the question you asked about the military aid support that U.S. has provided with great leadership, 48 billion followed by 60 billion. So the question to our MOD representative, Celeste and Hanno, is this strategy of as long as it takes still working? Is it a time for an adjustment? It's a larger version of the question asked by our Ukrainian colleague, but it's an answer to your question, sir, when you say, well, switching to actually Ukrainian going for victory. If I may ask our French and German representatives, I mean, the summit is taking 5 days before the Republican convention. What can we do in Europe to make sure that whoever wins the White House on November 5th is as excited about the alliance as the US administration for the last 75 years? Thanks.
One question here. Gentleman in the tan.
Vytautas Bruveris, Lithuanian news agency Elta. My question is, in contradiction to my Polish colleague, very narrow one, to Honorable Wallander. I wonder, could you be at least a little bit more specific about the very process, how it is going, current situation of the delivery of US-American aid to the very front lines, to the combat forces, to so-called zero zone? Why I'm asking this? Today, just a couple of hours ago, I was talking with officers of one of motorized infantry brigades in Bakhmut direction. As you well know, is one of, for more than a year, one of the most critical parts of the front, where Russians are still throwing everything and everyone they have to in order to break it. They are holding the line. And I asked the people, so, by the way, how is with American aid? You at last received something and someone, how does it play out? And the answer was no. We got zero. We don't know anything about that, and we are still working with in the same regime and a severe lack of, first of all, artillery munitions. So, summing it all up, how could you comment on that? Thank you.
And I just want to take a third so we get in as many as possible.
Yes, Gavin Wild from the Carnegie Endowment. I have a quick question in terms of what is NATO's role, or how do you see your own personal role in addressing skyrocketing monthly export numbers out of NATO members, including Estonia, Germany, Poland, to places like Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Turkey, inexplicable skyrocketing export numbers. What do you see your role in speaking to your counterparts in NATO capitals, but also with Brussels and the EU to address that?
Okay, so is as long as it takes still good enough with the side of how do you win over Trump or whoever is the next administration? How do you make sure that they understand the importance of this aid? Who would like to take that one?
Well, I'll take for as long as it takes in the specific question about supplies. I will not take the latter. It's not appropriate. What's the alternative for as long as it takes?
As much as it takes.
No, but the notion that this is time limited, President Biden has never indicated it's time limited. The shape of the assistance has changed, as I said, over time. And the shape will now be shifting to defense procurement, defense production. We already have billions of dollars of contracts executed and production on its way to Ukraine because of previous tranches of congressional support. And in the new supplemental, there is another $6 billion of USAI, Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, which lets us purchase from production. So there is more to come. It's just it's not coming out of our immediate stocks. We have been planning for this for 2 years, and we are executing it. But I also want to highlight something, because I know that there's a lot of side discussions, about this. I'll speak for the United States and for the Biden administration. We are fighting for Ukraine and helping Ukraine on the principle of it is a sovereign country, recognized and unrecognized as a member of the UN with all the rights and responsibilities as a member of the international community. And that means it is sovereign, independent, and the right to make its own decisions. So as long as it takes is primarily defined by Ukraine's aspirations, Ukraine's leadership, supported by its democracy, on defining what is victory, and we will do everything in our power to support Ukraine, because the principle we're fighting for, not just the country we are fighting for, is the UN Charter and sovereignty and the right of recognized countries under the UN Charter to make their own decisions and not have their large, brutal, problematic neighbor determine that for them. So we're not going to get in the business of telling Ukraine how long it takes. On security assistance from not just the United States, but a coalition of some 50 countries, is provided and handed over to Ukrainian armed forces at Ukrainian territory. So issues of distribution of that aid are the sovereign right and decision of the Ukrainian armed forces. We have worked with them to help them understand how NATO would do this, again, meeting those NATO interoperable standards. But in the end, the distribution of those capabilities is the right of the Ukrainian commanders, and they are making, as Minister Pevkur pointed out, very tough choices about where the need is most urgent, and they have to make those choices. Our job is to provide as much as we can, as fast as we can, and then advise them as best we can, but in the end, it is the choices of the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian commanders.
So maybe
I was going to say, we also have the French and German aspect of the question. Go
no
for
problem.
I wanted to pick up only of course, as long as it takes is correct, is okay, but I would prefer to say as much as it takes, because we have no time. We are losing time. We are really losing time. And as I said, Ukraine will not be able for the next 2 years to defend itself in a way it did in the last 2 years. And if new floods of refugees come to the west, to Poland and to Germany, that would also endanger our stability. Yeah? I have a situation in my constituency that the mayors tell me, okay, the next 100 refugees, I have no places for them. We are already, our cities and counties are already buying houses for the refugees, spending money for that. That is okay under a humanitarian aspect, but to explain that to the people is very complicated, and it's not a surprise that AfD has some 20% or so in Germany. That is one of the reasons that they are so successful. So we should really do more, and I would say, Minister, I don't see a disagreement. Of course, the capitals have to take the decision. Not in the NATO headquarters has to be taken the decision that Spain or Greece or whoever sends the next Patriot systems to Ukraine. But somebody has to organize it. Today we have only the so-called Rammstein format.
This is not a problem. I can assure you that. No. This is not a problem. When the capital makes a decision to send the Patriot to Ukraine, this will be delivered very quickly. So I can assure you.
But there is, aren't there like 19 weapon systems from Denmark that have been reported as delivered over and over and over? Isn't there a problem in terms of transparency and accountability? Sorry, Denmark.
Why don't I speak for Rammstein?
Yeah, because we have the General Agudo organizing
we track very. We have a NATO standard military accountability system that is supported by policy leadership by.
So you're quietly cracking the whip behind closed doors to shame somebody into following through with the promise?
You were talking about double counting. There's no double counting. It's we have a very clear, systematic approach, and we can account for what has been delivered, what has not been delivered. Okay. The fact that countries may remind everyone what they've contributed, I can't speak to the specific example you may be pointing to, but we have a very good understanding, and we track that in the context of the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, which is colloquially known as the Rammstein process. So that is not the concern. The concern is getting the commitments and the contributions,
of course,
and getting the hardware delivered so that it can be transferred across the border. And yes, we are diligent in reminding partners and members of the UDCG what they have announced to ensure that it actually gets delivered.
In that sense, I think it would be good if NATO would organize it and not the Czech Republic be the organizer for the ammunition. Yeah, that is my point. But leaving that aside, of course, what can we do? What do we have to do? Of course, to fulfill the 2% plus. That's absolutely clear. And the commitment from the German government, I'm from the opposition, and from us as opposition is absolutely clear for the coming future, and that means a lot because we are a little bit below 60 billion euros spending for our Bundeswehr, and we have to spend more than 80 million. So there's a lot to do in critical times, but we have to do it, and the commitment in the democratic center of Germany is clear.
Ambassador Vimont, did you have something to add? I think there was a French aspect to your question.
No, it was on the Republican Party, right? Trump 2.0. I'm getting sometimes a bit tired by the unpredictability of Trump. He's rather predictable. He's mostly transactional, and I think this is what we will see.
Ambassador, sorry to interrupt you.
Unfortunately, I have to leave. Excuse me,
yes.
please.
You've got a plane to catch.
Yeah, so catch a plane. Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining us.
All the best. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you.
I maybe should leave also quickly to avoid answering the question.
I have to go too.
I will stay.
But I will remain. Well done. Yes, I think we will, if ever Mr. Trump is re-elected, we will see the usual transactional Trump, which doesn't mean, in my opinion, that we will have the US leaving NATO or whatever, but it will be one of these transactional maneuvers that we have seen in the past. And what I think is really what is worrying to some extent is that, as in 2016, we may very well see Europeans, sorry, no, that's mine. Oh, this is mine. No, that's mine. Sorry, that's mine.
For how old?
That's. We will see probably and unfortunately very much divided European Union, with each and every member state working on its own to find its own way with this new administration. But once again, this is going to be an election very difficult to predict. The one thing I would add in my answer is that be aware, I've just been spending nearly 3 months in the United States a few weeks ago. I was still there, and I'm quite struck by not many people talk about Ukraine in the United States, let's be honest. They talk about immigration, they talk about the economic situation, they talk about abortion. For them, Ukraine is very much a European war, and we have to be aware of that. The 61 billion package passed the Congress, and we're all very happy with that, of course. But if you look at the figures, more than half of the Republicans in the House of Representatives voted against. So it's not a small number, and we have to be aware of that.
Regarding the Middle Asia, so well, first of all, I believe that still we need more sanctions on Russia and also on other goods. And Estonia is one of the forerunners here, and we are doing a lot. But of course, we also understand that there are products which are not under sanctions, and these products are still, traveling from point to point. Well, it's a rather global issue how we can prevent these goods moving, because we see that Russia is taking, for instance, chips also from breast pumps. Sorry to say that, but this is the reality. And this is why we have to sanction more and more precisely. To Michal, very shortly, basically it's the question of whatever it takes, not as long as it takes.
I'm going to disappoint some people. I'm Professor Dr. Chifu, and you've been raising your hand for a very long time. So if you could introduce yourselves.
Iulian Chifu, Romania. So I just have, Celeste, a question especially directed to you, because we have the summit, and actually we've seen already aggression, and I mean military aggression on our territories. It's the case of Romania, the case of Poland, the case of the other drone who arrived just in Slovenia, transiting a number of NATO countries, and that's the public part. How can we deal with the forward defense and not an inch of the territory to be subject? We also had casualties in Poland, by the way. How can we deal with this if we have to really look at defending on the other side of our border, in front of our border, respecting the sovereignties of the states? Ukraine is asking for no-fly zone for the whole territory, and Republic of Moldova will be very happy to welcome a type of commitment to face the threat in front of our territory, the imminent threat that targets. So it's a matter of redefinition of the forward defense. Thank you.
And one last one back here.
Thank you very much. Benjamin Tallis, German Council on Foreign Relations. I think the predominant feeling is one of great respect for what has been done, as the Assistant Secretary outlined, but also one of great frustration for what has not been done. Because as Johann Wadephul said, the it, in whatever it takes, has to be victory. The it, in as long as it takes, has to be victory. So what are we going to do to actually get there? Are we going to send the F-16s that, to be frank, Ukraine has been asking for a long time in sufficient number? Are we going to send Taurus? Are we going to follow up on the suggestion of the 4 Bundestag MPs who said we should use NATO air defense assets based in NATO countries to help provide air defense over Western Ukraine? Do we use that cover to send a training mission to help Ukraine reconstitute its forces? Or if not, what are we going to do to get to victory? Thank you.
And one last one, I lied.
And half of my question has been asked already, so I'll be quicker this time. So I'm Shota Guineria, Baltic Defense College. And we have heard that, and every credible analysis I have read about the trajectory of the war in Ukraine is that basically it's not sustainable. Ukraine is not going to win if the pace of the war is continuing like it is right now. And there is also a broad agreement that it will have catastrophic consequences. And coming from Georgia myself, I will just quickly raise this example. You know, as we speak, authoritarians have seized the opportunity, and they're taking advantage of weakness shown in Ukraine, and they're taking over Georgia, which is basically the Suwalki corridor between Iran and Russia, and the freedom corridor that is there. And one of the consequences that we were discussing is happening as we speak. So from this perspective, what can be the game changer? What can change the phase of the war which is going on right now and which is leading us to that catastrophic consequences? Thank you.
Well, maybe I will start and then Celeste will sum up with the summit. So anyway, first regarding the Ukrainian victory. Well, yes, it's quite easy for me to say that. You know, as Estonian Minister of Defense offered the solution here regarding the Ukrainian victory strategy. And, you know, to put it very simple, 0.25% of each country's GDP annually to Ukrainian defense means 120 billions, and this could give the Ukrainian the chance to get the victory home. But nevertheless, of course, I truly understand that it's not so easy. But one thing I really ask us to avoid and you know, to maybe not to talk so much is that, you know, what if Ukraine loses this war? Because when we start to talk about that option that Ukraine will not win, then this will be a normality. But because, and I truly believe that there is a chance for Ukraine to win, but we all need to do more. And to put it very simple, of course, I would love to say that everybody should do the same what Estonia has done. Then this war should have been already over many months back. But you know, there was a momentum during the Kharkiv counteroffensive. And then we didn't give enough that moment. So let's learn from this, and then let's just, you know, concentrate on that if we don't have anything to take from our stocks, then please allocate some funds, and we can help Ukraine to get the victory. And the second question was, okay, I'll stop here. So it's
Dr. Wallander.
Yeah, on Allied air defense, I can't speak to which countries, but in response to those incidents, at least 2 allies deployed new air defense capabilities to Romania, and you know, so we take that very seriously. And there are Allied air defense capabilities in Poland as well as Poland's own air defense capabilities. So that is, you know, absolutely concerned that either by accident or by intent, Russian UAVs and missiles are occasionally, and occasionally is too much, straying into and threatening NATO territory. So yes, we did respond to that. I will say that a big reason for air defense capabilities, visible air defense capabilities, is defense, and through that effective defense, deterrence. And so the presence of air defense capabilities on the front lines, or actually in depth throughout NATO territory itself, is possibly, you never know. Funny thing about deterrence, you never know why it worked. You just know that the bad things didn't happen. But that credible, effective air defense capability that the alliance builds together is there and is recognized, you know, by the Russian leadership. So specifically on F-16s, one of the things the Ukraine Defense Contact Group does, in addition to sending almost weekly security assistance required for today's battles, is working on building Ukraine's future defense force so that Ukraine can defend and hopefully, again, effectively deter Russian aggression in the, not just for this year, but for years to come, and especially building that to NATO standards as part of where I started on the point of making sure that on day one, Ukraine meets NATO standards and is interoperable. And one of the capability coalitions that we have under the Ukraine Defense Contact Group to work for that Ukrainian future force is Air Force, and the United States Air Force Capability Coalition, and the United States co-leads that along with Denmark and the Netherlands. And as a coalition, we have been working to train F-16 pilots, which does not happen overnight. It does not even happen in a week. It doesn't even happen in a month. And working to provide Ukraine with F-16s that are going to be donated by members of that capability coalition. And it also involves training not just pilots, but training maintainers and sustainers. This is a huge project, and it also involves financial support to Ukraine's infrastructure to support an F-16 capability. And we expect to be able to deliver the first tranche of that capability as early as this summer. And it is a serious capability, and it's part of that building towards Ukraine's future force. And that is part of what we want to capture back to the summit, at the Washington summit, which is the Kremlin believes it can outlast us. It believes that it will see fractures in the Western unity for Ukraine within the NATO alliance and commitment to 2%, to building defense industrial production, to countering Russia, to sustaining credible defense for effective deterrence. And the Washington summit will send a very clear message that Putin is wrong.
Moderator's prerogative, my lightning round question in our last minute. Prime Minister Kallas posited that Ukraine might perhaps consider giving up part of its territory in order to get NATO membership, which would protect the rest of its territory. Do you think that Ukraine is going to have to give up some of its territory for that protection?
Well, I have to come for a second to the very opening of that conference by Indrek Kannik, who reminded all of us the brilliant sentence of Lennart Meri that the situation is shit, and this is the shit of this shit is a fertilizer of the future. But I have to rephrase it, because for Ukrainians at the moment, this shit is not the fertilizer of the future. And this is, sorry to be rude, but Lennart was very blunt. As I see it, we as a Western societies, together, we have the chance to help Ukrainians to be owners of their own land. For that, they need everything we can give to them. And we have even more to give from different countries outside of Europe, outside of NATO countries, because we've identified a lot of possibilities how to help them, and we are in constant contact with Ukrainian military. So in that sense, I'm still working daily basis on that I will send all the necessary help to Ukraine to get back all the lands and to be in the borders of 91. Because this is the ultimate goal of Ukrainians, and when they want to achieve that, we have to help them.
Ambassador, 91, is that the goal?
No, I think this is exactly the kind of issue you should not discuss in public.
Pesky press.
But it's an issue that you should discuss confidentially with certainly your Ukrainian partners at some stage. Because my impression, one of the reasons why the Western allies, the supporters of Ukraine, are having such difficulty in getting rid of their self-inflicting restriction, constraints, etc., is that we have never really discussed the long game about this whole war. We have been discussing time again in crisis management mode, moving quickly, using strategic patience as long as it takes. Time is on our side, whatever. But without looking really at the end game of all this, what would we like as the end game for this war, and discussing it between ourselves and with the Ukrainians, because we know perfectly well that we are probably very much divided on this. But you know, trying to leave aside the issues that are not the comfortable ones is not the right solution. It's the easy solution, and it leads you nowhere. And I think we're more or less at this crucial moment when we need to have these kinds of discussion, but we need to have them in a very confidential way, in my opinion.
Secretary Wallander, last word. And I must stress that Prime Minister Kallas also said this is Ukraine's decision.
Well, far be it from me to disagree with the Prime Minister. I think that's what it comes down to, is that, again, the United States is not involved in this extraordinary challenge to European and global security because we've decided we're going to dictate or determine how Ukraine decides. We are in this because we are supporting Ukraine and the Ukrainian people, but we are supporting the principles that make the international community safer. Those were established after long, bitter, and terrible experience of 2 world wars in the 20th century, and wars continue, and often those are generated by one country deciding that it's going to dictate terms to a neighbor or to another country. That way lies civilian death, destruction, pain, often unresolved conflicts that reemerge. And so the best way, the only way to end Russia's war against Ukraine is to support Ukraine and to support its sovereign choices and decisions. And I cannot imagine anyone from the United States government sitting up here and saying anything less.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our speakers. And please stay seated for the Lennart Meri lecture. This one?
Thank you very much. I'm now going to introduce President Toomas Hendrik Ilves, who will introduce this year's Lennart Meri lecture, who is Timothy Schneider, everybody's favorite historian. Here you go, President Ilves.
Thank you. I'm quite honored to be able to do this today. One Timothy Garden-Nash, pointed out many years ago, one of the great historians of Eastern Europe, said that when Americans say something is history, they say that means you're irrelevant. When Europeans say this something is history, it means here comes trouble. In the past 15, 20 years, there's been one person who has been both a great historian of this region and one person, and the same person